She was 7 months pregnant, working late at a gas station when her manager humiliated her in front of everyone. No one defended her, but what no one realized was that Liam Neeson was there, watching it all from the shadows. And what he did next didn't just silence the manager, it transformed her life. Watch until the very end to discover how a single, quiet act of justice changed everything, and why no one who saw it would ever forget it. It was past midnight when the freezing wind began to crawl across the edges of the quiet town of Albuquerque. The kind of cold that didn't just brush against the skin, but sank into it, leaving the bones humming with discomfort. Most people had retreated indoors, leaving the streets wet, empty, and forgotten under flickering yellow lights. A lone gas station stood at the edge of a worn-out boulevard, its buzz of neon casting a pale glow across the cracked pavement. Inside the lot, a young woman in a worn uniform was scrubbing the base of a pump, her movements slow but determined. Her belly, swollen with the weight of late pregnancy, pulled on her spine with every motion, but she moved forward anyway, not because she could, but because she had to. Her name was Anna, though no one called her by it that night. To the customers, she was just hey or miss or worse, you. Her boss didn't even bother hiding the disdain in his voice, barking orders like she were nothing more than a piece of equipment to be pushed harder. He stood near the convenience store entrance, sipping coffee like a king overlooking his exhausted servant. Every once in a while, he'd mock her pace, her condition, or the fact that she kept holding her lower back. And each time she said nothing. Her silence was a shield. Words only made it worse. On the far side of the station, at Pump 4, a man in a dark hoodie stepped out of a black SUV with out-of-state plates. His face was hidden beneath the hood, and he moved slowly, deliberately, as if his presence depended on not being noticed. He filled his tank in silence, but his eyes, sharp and observant, were not idle. They locked on to Anna with quiet precision, studying the way she bent with difficulty, how she winced as she straightened, how she paused ever so slightly before moving to the next pump. She wasn't just working, she was carrying pain like luggage. The man didn't move at first. He simply watched, letting the moment settle over him like the cold air. And then, as the pump clicked, he turned toward the store, passing under the red and green glow of the overhead lights. On the wall, just outside the entrance, there was a dusty old photo board, laminated, water-stained, and cracked at the edges. It was a collage of celebrities who had supposedly passed through the town over the decades. Most of the faces were faded. Some were barely visible, but one photo stood out under the plastic. A younger Liam Neeson standing near this very station years ago. No one noticed the resemblance. Not the tired cashier behind the counter, not the loud manager barking at Anna to mop faster, and certainly not the handful of late-night customers grabbing cheap coffee and snacks. To them, he was just another old man in a hoodie, someone to ignore, to forget, to overlook. But he noticed everything. He noticed how Anna limped slightly when she walked. He noticed the way she rubbed her lower back, not with frustration, but fear. Fear that she might not make it through the shift without collapsing. He noticed the way she glanced toward the small break room window with a flicker of longing, only to lower her eyes and keep moving. There was no time for breaks, no space for kindness, not in her world. And then he heard it. The manager's voice rose, sharp and condescending, cutting through the night air like a slap. She had spilled a bucket of water near one of the pumps, the mop slipping from her hand after a particularly hard bend. The water splashed across the pavement, soaking her shoes. She tried to retrieve the mop, but the manager stormed over, snatching it before she could and tossing it into the cleaning closet with a loud bang. His words were cruel, dripping with sarcasm. He called her careless. He questioned her usefulness. He made a point of asking why he should even bother letting her finish her shift. No one intervened. No one looked up. But the man in the hoodie did. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his gaze. eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in something deeper, something colder, something absolute. He didn't step forward, not yet. Instead, he turned around and walked quietly toward his SUV. But before entering, he paused at the old bulletin board again, his gaze returning to that weathered photo of himself. He stared at it, as if weighing a memory against the present, as if measuring the distance between who he was and who he had become. Anna, soaked and shivering, walked back to the pump with the grace of someone who had no more energy left to apologize. Her hands trembled as she wiped her arms on her sleeves. A customer passed her without acknowledgement, stepping into the warmth of the store without so much as a glance. Inside the SUV, the man sat for a long time, engine running, windshield wipers keeping rhythm with the drizzle. He didn't reach for the steering wheel. Instead, he took out a pen from the glove box and began to write, slowly, purposefully, as if each letter had weight. The glow from the station lights flickered against his face, briefly revealing the unmistakable lines, the sharp jaw, the thoughtful brow, the quiet force behind every movement. Liam Neeson didn't need anyone to recognize him. He didn't need applause. What he needed was a plan. The next morning would not be ordinary. The world hadn't noticed what happened, but he had. And what came next wouldn't just change her night, it would change her life. When the manager told her she was only good for mopping floors and lifting boxes, the man in the hoodie finally raised his head. And in that moment, everything began to change. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the cracked windows of the gas station in faded gold. The warmth was deceptive. The air still bit at the skin with early winter's chill, and the silence outside was broken only by the occasional rumble of delivery trucks. Inside the small break room, Anna tucked her hair behind her ears and exhaled deeply, her body sore from the night before. Every inch of her ached, but the pain had become familiar, like an old coat she could no longer take off. As she opened the drawer behind the counter to restock the receipt paper, her hand brushed against something unexpected. An envelope. Not one of the standard business kind, but a simple off-white envelope with her name written across the front in careful, elegant handwriting. Her breath caught for a second. She looked around. The store was empty. Her boss hadn't arrived yet. The cameras above her blinked silently, indifferent. Inside the envelope, there was no card, no branding, just a folded piece of thick paper and a slip of something heavier. She opened it with a trembling hand. On the paper, a single line had been written, ink pressed firmly, yet with restraint. No one should be treated the way you were last night. L. Beneath it were two neatly folded documents, official letters printed on heavyweight paper with embossed seals. At first, she didn't understand. Her eyes scanned the headers slowly, unsure if they were real. They were. Both were signed by a woman whose name she recognized from the credits of several films. A producer, a real one. The first was a reference letter. The second, an offer to consider her for a training opportunity on a film set, pending a background check. Her stomach turned, not out of fear, but disbelief. She looked at the signature again. That initial L. Her hand tightened around the paper, then quickly slipped everything back into the envelope and hid it beneath the counter. The door opened behind her, the jingle cutting through her thoughts like a blade. The manager walked in with the same smug stride, coffee in hand, oblivious to the letter or to the way Anna now stood a little straighter, her hand protectively over her stomach, as if something inside her had shifted, not just the baby, but something deeper. Something about the world had cracked open, and someone had noticed her. She tried to return to her tasks, but the moment kept echoing in her mind. That man, the hooded figure at Pump 4, the quiet presence, the way he had looked at her, not with pity, but with a kind of recognition, a kind of weight. Could it have been? But there wasn't time to reflect. Customers began to arrive, and the day swept her into its usual rhythm. Still, she kept glancing toward the drawer, afraid it might vanish, afraid it wasn't real. By late afternoon, just as the shift was winding down, a small confrontation erupted. The manager had found the envelope. He didn't ask where it came from. He demanded answers. His voice rose loud and cutting, accusing her of hiding something, of using the job to scheme, of being ungrateful. But this time, something was different. A customer, a quiet man standing near the coffee machine, pulled out his phone and began to record. Anna didn't yell. She didn't defend. She didn't even speak. She simply took the envelope back, clutched it to her chest, and walked out the back door without another word. That night, alone in the modest one-bedroom apartment she shared with her cousin, Anna sat on the floor near the heater, staring at the contents again. Her daughter's crib was already set up, half assembled beside a wall, waiting for the day life would allow her to pause long enough to finish it. With careful fingers, she searched online, first the name of the producer, then the initials, then the quote, and then she searched him. Her screen filled with images, movie stills, red carpet shots, fan photos, but it was the older ones that made her heart race. The jawline, the posture, the intensity. She scrolled until she found a grainy photo taken years ago. A man standing in front of the very gas station where she worked, one arm raised in a half wave to the camera. She looked closer. Same eyes, same lines at the corners, the same silence captured even in stillness. She remembered the man in the hoodie glancing at that old photo on the wall. It was him. Her hand trembled as she picked up the phone. She didn't even know what she planned to say. She just dialed the number printed at the bottom of the second letter. It rang once, then twice. Then a calm voice answered, not robotic, not scripted. And before she could even ask, the voice said her name, not the one on her work badge, her full name, her real name. She didn't know what to say. Her voice faltered. But the voice on the other end didn't rush her. Instead, it simply said that he had been expecting her call, that a driver would be there in the morning, that she should rest. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. Her mind raced with what-ifs and maybes, but between each wave of doubt, a flicker of something brighter bloomed, something long buried. A strange, quiet feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. Hope. When the driver pulled up the next morning, the name on the dashboard wasn't a company or a production. It was just one word, written in bold, steady letters, Liam. The black car pulled up to the curb just as the sky began to shift from gray to gold. The city was still waking, its streets quiet, shadows long and undisturbed. Anna stood by the sidewalk with her coat buttoned tightly over her belly, one hand resting gently on her stomach, the other holding the same envelope that had somehow changed everything. The windows of the car were tinted, but on the dashboard sat a plain white card with a single word printed in bold, careful letters, Liam. No title, no company, no logo, just the name. She stepped inside, greeted by warm air and a driver who said nothing but nodded with quiet understanding. The car moved through the city in silence, as if the world itself had agreed to pause. Anna stared out the window as unfamiliar streets passed by, her mind filled with questions too delicate to say aloud. She didn't know where she was being taken, only that somehow this road felt like it was leading her back to something she had forgotten how to hope for. The ride ended just outside the city limits, near the foothills where morning fog still clung to the landscape. A small production base had been set up in a clearing, modest but alive with movement. Trucks, trailers, crew members, generators hummed. Someone carried cables across a gravel path. The smell of coffee and fresh sawdust lingered in the air. But among all the motion, one detail stood still. At the center of it all was a trailer with a small nameplate near the door. No security, no fanfare, no barrier, just one word again. Liam. She stepped out slowly, unsure if she was supposed to knock or wait. But before the uncertainty could paralyze her, the door opened. And he was there. He looked the same as he had behind the gas pump. Same quiet eyes, same stillness. But now there was no hood, no reason to hide, just presence, calm, unshaken, and entirely real. He stepped outside and approached her with the pace of someone who carried nothing loud, but everything meaningful. There were no grand gestures, no speeches, only a steady gaze that held her long enough to say what words couldn't. And in that silence, something softened inside her. The armor she had worn for years, cracked without pain, just release. He guided her gently through the camp, past the crew, past the trailers, past the sets being built. Not a single person asked who she was. No one looked at her like she didn't belong. And in that silence, she understood the difference between being invisible and being seen without being examined. Near the catering tent, she was given a seat and a warm plate. Real food, not gas station leftovers. As she ate, she noticed something on the table beside her, a thick folder with her name typed across the cover. Inside, documents, referrals, options. There was a training program starting the following week. Hospitality and production services, housing assistance, childcare options, no promises, just possibilities. The kind that only ever appeared in other people's lives. She looked up and saw him standing near one of the monitors, watching a rehearsal. He didn't call attention to her. He didn't need to. His presence said everything, and the choice was hers now. That afternoon, she met a woman from the production team. Someone kind, calm, efficient. They walked her through next steps, answered her questions. Not once did they make her feel small. Not once did they mention pity. And when they handed her a small packet of starter forms, the last page was a handwritten note. For Anna, this is not charity. This is a reset, and you are more than ready. Days passed, then weeks. Anna trained, learned, observed. She moved quietly through the halls of the production facility with a notepad always in hand. The baby kicked often now, but it felt different. Less like a reminder of the weight she carried and more like a signal that she was still here, still becoming. Back in her hometown, things began to shift. The manager at the gas station had no idea that a customer had recorded the confrontation weeks earlier. But when that video surfaced online, it didn't take long. Comments flooded in. News outlets called it the quietest takedown of the year. People weren't angry, they were moved, not just by the injustice, but by the silence that followed. The absence of revenge, the strength of dignity. He lost his job. The station issued an apology. But Anna never returned to respond. Some battles win themselves when you simply walk away. Months passed. The day of the baby's birth arrived just as spring broke through the final edge of winter. The hospital room was quiet, clean, peaceful. And when they placed the newborn in her arms, she didn't cry at first. She just looked down, as if meeting a future she hadn't known she could still have. She named him Liam. Not because she owed anything, but because the name had come to mean something far more than fame or film. It meant presence, witness, grace that asked for nothing in return. Weeks later, she returned to the production office, not as a visitor, but as part of the team. Her name was on the schedule, her badge was real, and on her desk sat a photo she had taken, her son asleep beside a box of colored pencils. Because long before this new chapter, before the trailer and the car ride, and the letter, before the gas station even, she had been someone. A girl with dreams, with hands that could cook and clean and create. She had only needed one moment, one person to look her way and say, "I see you." And now she saw herself again. Liam returned to the set weeks later. The film had wrapped. The lot was being cleared. But he walked quietly across the gravel, coffee in hand, and found her near the kitchen tent, helping prep the final meal of the week. She looked up, smiled, nodded once. He didn't stay long. He never did. He sat at a table in the corner, the same way he had at the gas station, watching people move. Not controlling them, just observing, honoring their presence. As he stood to leave, he passed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a quote printed in soft ink. "Dignity doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real." He walked away. No goodbye, no spotlight. Just a quiet exit through the edge of the lot, into a car with no markings, under a sky that was finally beginning to clear. And when her son took his first steps months later, it wasn't in a hospital or a shelter, but across the floor of a film set kitchen, as Liam Neeson watched from a distance and quietly smiled, knowing the story had only just begun. If this story moved you like it moved everyone who witnessed what Liam did that night, leave a comment, sharing what moment touched your heart the most. Tag someone who believes in silent strength, in the power of doing the right thing without asking for credit. And if you want more stories like this, stories that restore faith in humanity and remind us that kindness still exists, subscribe to the channel. We share new stories every week that will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. We'll see you in the next one.